So good morning, everyone. I'll let everybody sit down. I hope everybody survived the apocalyptic day of yesterday that we ordered especially because of the theme of the event. I don't know if some of you heard about the craziness even in our CartONG office, where we actually had a ceiling collapsing. So we've had quite a crazy day yesterday also on the CartONG team. I hope you're all enjoying the event. It was a very intense day today. It'll be a bit less intense today, hopefully, so that you're all in good shape for the third day also tomorrow. Welcome also to our online participants. So today we're going to start by giving you an overview of an initiative that we've had at CartONG for the past 3 years. And then we will have 4 lightning talk interventions, of which you see 3 of the speakers here with me on stage, and we'll have a video intervention also of the 4th speaker. But to get straight into business, so the initiative we're presenting today is on a project to strengthen the data practices of francophone NGOs that we've been running since 2019 at CartONG. And I'll start by introducing the initiative and then hand over to the evaluator of the project, Keynote Consulting, who wanted to share the feedback from their evaluation that they've just finished. And we'll finish by giving you a bit of an overview of what's next. So to start by a story, very quickly, to let you know that since 2015, CartONG has been facilitating an informal community of practice amongst francophone NGOs. That has been a lot of fun. And we spent a lot of time with various people that have about 5 different hats, like a lot of you have known in the past years, where you have the information management hat, but you're also the M&E expert, also the tech person looking after the printer and whatnot. So a lot of these NGOs had multiple hats. And we were often looking at each other, discussing the same topics, wondering how we could advance with very little resources for this. And so we managed to go from that to a sector-level initiative to help strengthen the data practices of francophone NGOs. And this was, to a great extent, thanks to the support of the French Development Agency. And you see a number of the partners of the project here on the screen, and a lot of them are either here in the room or connected online also. And we've advanced together on this journey over the past few years. So what have we achieved? So it's hard for me to present this in less than 5 minutes, a 3-year initiative, but very briefly, 4 points I would like to highlight. So first of all, we did everything we could to help build a sector dynamic. And in a nutshell, it was really about starting much needed conversations about the stakes of the day on data. So a lot that you're all confronted with on a day-to-day basis around data literacy or such. And just help organizations meet and exchange on their practices to make sure that everybody's aware of how things are going in other organizations around these topics, how it's advancing, how the topic is tackled. And one of the things that we really felt in these organizations is that where they all had multiple hats a few years ago, more and more they've been able to structure themselves and have dedicated staff or teams, which is also a great achievement on their side. So we did this through exchange days, awareness-raising sessions, experience sharing also from Anglophone NGOs, as the Francophone sector was a bit late on these topics, and I think still is. We then put the topic on the map. By helping structure the branch that we actually tried to be more specific about than just talking about information management, by talking about program data, which worked well in French in particular, where the translation of information management wasn't great. And also it helped be more specific than information management. That's a very generic term that also wasn't understood at all by development NGOs. So it's something where a lot of the resources that you'll see as part of this project, you'll realize that we're talking more often about program data than information management. So we came out with a number of studies, also helping organizations evaluate their degree of maturity on these topics by self-assessment methodologies, and a number of benchmarkings also to encourage a sustainable and more rational selection of tools and technologies. If you're interested in any of these, don't hesitate to check out the CartONG stand upstairs afterwards. The third thing we've achieved is finally having a real resource portal dedicated to information management online that's an entry point for sector specialists on the topic of information management. And a lot of the resources that are up there are resources that come from your organizations. So we do a curated watch around this on a regular manner. And we try and also avoid too much noise, so really choose the ones that are the most relevant to make sure that you're not overloaded by resources. And you can check out directly the site if you wish. But I think what we're the most proud of is our Learning Corner, which is really dedicated to field teams with very operational resources, a number of toolboxes, and what you see here on the slide that was prepared a week ago has already changed with a lot of new toolboxes that we managed to make available right before GeONG in English in particular, as all the French one had been available for a while, with both toolboxes on topics like MDC, GIS, how to excel in the field, also various topics around data analysis, data visualization, and many modules for training also of field teams. We try to not reinvent the wheel, of course, by also building on sector resources that might exist. And as there was a big gap on the francophone side in particular, we've also translated some of the key resources that we found important of the sector, be it OCHA, responsible data guidelines, ACAP's resources, other H2H actors like the engine room and such. So I'll hand over now to the evaluator of the project who will present their findings on the initiative. If you can put the video on. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this key findings presentation. I am Céline Cagliaro, humanitarian consultant for Keynote Consulting, and I was the main evaluator for this external evaluation. First of all, I will briefly present the objective and the methodology of the evaluation. This final evaluation was conducted with a view to collective learning, accountability, and transparency. The main objective of this evaluation was to report on the achievements of the project by highlighting accomplishments, limitations, and areas of improvement, while making recommendations for improving future intervention. The evaluation focuses on qualitative aspects of the project using the following OECD DAC criteria: relevance, coherence, efficacy, and sustainability. In terms of methodology, the evaluation was based on a mixed method approach using a variety of secondary and primary findings. Through the data collection, we conducted 18 online interviews, 2 online surveys, and 1 focus group discussion. Now that you have a clearer understanding of the objective and of the methodology of the evaluation, I am going to present you some of the main findings of each evaluation criteria. This first slide presents findings linked to the relevance of the project. The main evaluation question for this criteria was to what extent does the project correspond to the needs and expectations of CSO partners and beneficiaries of the project. First of all, the project was designed and implemented in a participatory way, in a climate of trust and transparency, established by CartONG. Thanks to this participative approach, CartONG has designed a relevant project as it responds to a variety of needs and expectations of francophone CSOs. However, the participation of the project partners and beneficiaries were hammered by three main external factors. First of all, we have the lack of time and human resources within the CSOs to devote to the project. Then we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which negatively impacted the CSOs' participation to the project. And finally, we have the staff turnover, which is relatively common in the humanitarian and development sector. This second slide presents the findings linked to the coherence of the project. And the main evaluation question for this criteria was to what extent is the project coherent with current issues in the sector. This first point, based on secondary data and key informant interviews feedback, is that program data management is a central theme among current issues in the international solidarity sector. Furthermore, the project has an innovative approach in the sector by targeting francophone CSOs. Indeed, few materials and support were available in French, and hence the project addresses needs that were not previously covered. This third slide presents findings linked to the efficacy of the project. The evaluation question for this criteria was to what extent has the project achieved its intended results and effects. First of all, CSOs partners and beneficiaries interviewed are familiar with almost all the different types of deliverables produced by CartONG. However, few CSOs know all the deliverables produced by CartONG within each type of deliverables. The most used deliverables are the toolkits and the structuring study produced by CartONG. The use of CartONG's deliverables varies between CSOs and depends on two main factors. First of all, the time available of staff responsible from program data management. And second of all, the level of progress of CSOs in terms of data management. Key informants were unanimous about the quality of the deliverable produced by CartONG. However, a large quantity and diversity of deliverables were produced in a very short time frame, and this did not leave enough time for ownership by the targeted CSOs. This fourth slide presents findings linked to the durability or the sustainability of the project. The main evaluation question for this criteria was to what extent has the effect of the project sustainable. First of all, the majority of CSOs partners and beneficiaries of the project reported gaining sustainable knowledge on program data management. However, CSO partners and beneficiaries are still taking ownership of the deliverable produced by CartONG. Regarding sustainability, all the key informants interviewed mentioned that the IM portal and the Learning Corner were important and indispensable assets to answer the sustainability of the project. Finally, some key informants indicated that coaching from CartONG could strengthen this ownership and the sustainability of the project. To conclude, the evaluation of the project highlights its relevance to the need and expectation of francophone CSOs and its coherence with the current issues in the international solidarity sector. CSOs are unanimous and underline the quality and diversity of the deliverable produced. Although the balance chosen by CartONG between quality, diversity, and quantity of deliverables produced seemed to satisfy the project beneficiaries, the quantity of deliverable was too high for the duration of the project. This point, which may appear negative, is not because of the dissemination strategies chosen by CartONG. Indeed, the IM portal and the Learning Corner are sustainable platforms ensuring the sustainability of the project. The result of this evaluation, together with the unanimous feedback of the key informant interviews, underlines the need to consolidate the achievements of the project and to consider a new phase. This new phase could focus on 2 points: the ownership of the deliverables of the project by the CSOs, and the second point on the dissemination of the deliverables on the national and regional platforms in CSOs countries of intervention. Thank you.
Kate did a great job in managing to summarize a very complex project, so we're very happy about the evaluation, and I'm not going to react on it per se, because I agree with a lot of what they've been saying, and a lot of the NGOs that are benefiting from the project are still digesting the resources, I'm very much aware. So just a few points. Oh, first of all, if you want to check out the evaluation, you can find it here on the CartONG website, or also on the resource stand if you wish to have a look. We're still in the phase where we're not really sure whether there'll be a second phase, although we hope so very much. So we're in a bit of a transition period, but building both on what the evaluation team have come out with and also our own analysis. We're having 4 main areas of focus that we hope to be able to work on in the coming years. So the evaluator has mentioned a lot the question of sustainability, and that's one of the key things that we want to continue. So now there's the IM portal, the Learning Corner. How do we make these platforms sustainable and live as long as possible? And if anybody's interested in being a part of that adventure, don't hesitate to reach out on this. Secondly, on the learning by doing side, we're going to try and rework also the content of the Learning Corner to make sure there's a bigger diversity of formats, and overall making it easier for field teams to continue in their learning path around program data. On the dissemination front, we definitely have a lot of work to do. We've focused also very much on francophone NGOs. You see that a lot of the resources that came out this year in particular were only translated to English very recently, and I'm sure some of you have never heard of them before. So I hope that from now on you'll have a look, and I hope they'll be useful to you also. But we'll be focusing quite a lot on the dissemination side. And lastly, we want to explore something that's been discussed a little bit over the past day, but not that much, the localization dimension. And by localization, we mean both thinking through how field teams can take better ownership around program data and information management in general, and also thinking through how to help build local communities around data that can support NGOs and organizations directly in the field in a more efficient fashion. So very briefly, if you're interested in receiving future updates, if you're interested more on the watch side around the IM portal, there's a portal newsletter that you can register to receive the newest sector resources every 2 months in your mailbox. And if you're interested rather on the project side, to join the community, be informed about all the project events, exchange days, and all the resources we're planning on coming out with, you can contact this email address, renforcement-osc@cartong.org, knowing that, again, we've been very focused on the francophone side and not informed that much our more anglophone friends of the project, but this is something that we mean to work on. So even if you're not francophone, a lot of the resources that are out there will hopefully be very relevant to you. And I'll stop there for the part on the AFD project and hand over to our lightning talk speakers that I'll present to start off with. I'll present them all in one go. So Mariana Carrillo from GIZ, don't hesitate to come over, who's a technical advisor at GIZ. Then we'll have Yann Rebois, head of geodata and analytics at ICRC. We'll then have a video intervention about the ADAPT initiative from Groupe URD by Joanne Bretou-Klein. And finally, we'll have Tri Salasa from OSM Indonesia. He's the Associate Project Manager, and he'll talk about collective mapping for data-driven flood mitigation. And this is for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I am very, very excited to be here with you in presence and online today to share what we at the GIZ and in Data for Policy are doing together with our partner in the government of Mexico City to unleash the potential of data for gender equality in Mexico City. So, gender inequality, it affects and it manifests in many forms in our daily lives. And one evident and not so evident of these manifestations is the uneven distribution of unpaid care and housework. So this is a socioeconomic phenomena that is present not only in developing economies, because, for example, women, on average, in OECD countries, spend almost twice as much of their time as men performing this unpaid care and housework. And this figure rises up to 3 times for Mexican women in comparison to Mexican men. And if we were to monetize the value of this unpaid care and housework, this would represent around 21% of Mexico's GDP. And that's a lot. And this is like a very raw figure of how gender inequality manifests and which consequences it has, not only social consequences, but also economic consequences. So, I mean, this is the macro level, right? These are the numbers, these are the official statistics, but what is behind these numbers? Who is behind these numbers? So, it's women like Lucia. Lucia, she is a mother of several children, and she would like to be more financially independent, but for doing this, she doesn't have much time left after house and care work. And yeah, I mean, she would like to take her youngest child to the kindergarten so she can go look for a paid employment, but the transport connection is not really good. And all of this is what's hindering for her to access gainful employment. There's a lot going on around Lucia's story and women like Lucia. So it's not the access not only the access to childcare, it's not only the access to a good connection for transport or the affordability of it, it's many factors playing together. So together with the Ministry of Women in Mexico City, we are trying to map the supply and the demand of childcare, and together also with the transport connections, taking into account different factors like affordability, accessibility, and for doing this, of course, even though Mexico has a very mature data ecosystem, there are still data gaps, gender data gaps. And what we're trying to do is to bring together different data sources, traditional data sources like survey data, but also satellite imagery to have a better and a more granular understanding of this phenomena. But we're also using a mixed methodology, which means we're not only using quantitative data, we're also using qualitative data. And for doing this, we are retrieving it via a chatbot using WhatsApp to know what are the needs of women, what do they need what are the barriers that they are facing in order to access gainful employment? Is this really related only to transportation, or is it related to social and cultural norms? And what we are aiming for is to gather all of this information in order to put all of these insights into an intelligent decision platform that allow decision makers to understand the trade-offs of choosing policy option A over policy option B, or what would be the potential reach if they made this decision over the other. And our aim as Data for Policy and the GIZ is also to support the policymakers not only to have this information to have a more evidence-informed decision-making process, but also in the end to contribute to increasing the chances of having a gender-sensitive and even gender-transformative policymaking in our partner countries. So if you are interested in getting to know more about this, get in touch. And also about our other projects, because we work globally. And thank you so much.
Good morning. I'm Yann Rebois. I would like to present you a project that is done at the ICRC called RedSafe. The idea of this project is really to empower the people most at risk with data and information. We will look on what is RedSafe. We will focus on the service nearby, what are the objectives. We will have a high-level architecture overview, and we could see the workflow implementation, and finally, where to get up. Yesterday, Lars was mentioning that whenever we build an application, whenever we do something techy and fancy, we should really think about the impact on the life and if people could not access to the information that they are used to. And typically, the RedSafe application was done in this spirit in order to provide a secure mean and single digital entry point for ICRC beneficiaries to interact with the ICRC and the ICRC partners. So it's a mobile app, and it's as well a web application. What you will find in this application, you will find what we call it information as aid. So basically, you will be able to get the information on, let's say, legal advice, legal support, and kind of things. You are able to scan your passport and your travel documents in case of, because most of the time when you flew or when you escape, you remain with only a smartphone in your hands, right? And that's also something that we are along the migrants road, for instance. We could provide some boots of information to load the smartphone. Sorry. Digital vault. Then we will focus on the map of service or service nearby. The idea is to have something like, as you are probably familiar, to get the service close to you, but the search service is something that is related for the humanitarian sectors, where to find help, where you to find some legal advice, where to get the information. And something as well that was developed, it's a message in order to say, I'm safe, something that is pre-formatted. We did a pilot in South Africa and Zimbabwe, working well, a lot of adoption, and the next pilot will be in Central America. What is focus on the service nearby? The objective is really to provide relevant information on map. Of course, myself, I'm the head of geodata and analytics team, so we are providing a lot of mapping service. And one of the primary concerns is really to ensure that the data protection of the end user. So we could not use external provider like Mapbox or Google, so we have to set up our own tile server or own infrastructure to ensure that the IPs and the data are not tracked and to guarantee the safest as possible information. We did on-premises routing. We organize as well web mapping. And one of the things that we have to do is as well to synchronize the information with the point of interest that we will deliver to the affected population. So in terms of workflow, at the ICRC, we have a lot of data, referential data or master data that are managed internally. What we have to do is we built on top of this internal data a front end where the RedSafe team and the GIS team are able to collect and to edit information, and we have to enrich this information because most of the information that is in master data or internal data doesn't have the information that is really needed for the beneficiary, typically the opening hours, the contacts, the details, phone numbers, blah, 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 and so on. So we really have to enrich it, and once it's enriched, it's synchronized with Elasticsearch, and then it's pushed back to the application. High-level architecture. We worked with a mix of open source application with tile layer and everything into Docker, and the management of the point of interest is done with a foundation of the S3 server, right? Everything is synchronized and a bit processed with the FME software, and everything is API enabled, and then colleagues and end user could use it through their smartphone. Where to get the app? Redsave. You have a look on the website. You could flash the QR code. You might have some problems because you are not in the country, or today, because it was that today the application is only for the countries that I described before, and it will be and as well for Switzerland and for South America. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joanna, and I'm here today on behalf of the ADAPT initiative. In a context where climate change will lead to more frequent, more destructive, and less predictable disasters, the humanitarian sector needs to adapt to these new challenges. In this lightning talk, I will present the ADAPT initiative, which is currently still in its inception phase. The initiative aims to bring together stakeholders to work on these much-needed changes in the humanitarian sector. Thank you very much for joining us today. I will start this talk by underlining the challenges that climate change will create for the humanitarian sector, before presenting what our initiative seeks to do, essentially trying to enable a rapid and effective pivot to confront the crises of climate change. Firstly, a few words on how climate change will impact three fundamental aspects of humanitarian work. The first aspect is the scale of the humanitarian challenge. We can expect more, larger, more widespread, and less predictable disasters. We are already seeing this happening with respect to tropical storms, flooding, heat events, and wildfires. Although the evidence is not clear and sometimes contradictory, we will almost certainly see more displacement and possibly more conflict. Importantly, this is not instead of the humanitarian caseload. Climate change doesn't make other humanitarian crises go away. It is in addition to the current caseload. The second aspect is the nature of humanitarian crises. They will become less predictable. We will also have to face crises which we have until now had very little experience with. Heat waves and thawing events, for example. And as crises increase in scale and interact, we can expect more complex, unprecedented, and rapidly changing situations. The third way in which humanitarian work will be challenged will be through changes in context of responses. We can expect high levels of vulnerability, increased securitization, and an increased domestic focus. Indeed, it could be expected that as traditional donor countries face the impacts of climate change themselves, they will put less attention to other countries and their issues. So, what is the way forward? We don't really know the answer to this, hence the question mark. And we probably can't know until we try, because we're dealing with high levels of uncertainty. But it is safe to assume that it will mean very significant changes in the who, the when, and the how of humanitarian action. The who. We need a shift to local leadership. This means we need new partners and new partnerships involving local civil society organizations and requiring massive amount of government support. The when. The scale of crises will overwhelm attempts that focus only on responding. Joined-up approaches that looked at building resilience and decreasing vulnerability and preparing for response and mobilizing in the early stages of a crisis and recovery will all be required. The how. It follows that humanitarians will also need to be more flexible and adaptive in response phase to deal with crises that do not develop as anticipated. Taken together, these changes amount to a massive transformation. But we also know that change can happen in the system. And when it happens, it often begins with concrete activities on the ground to solve practical problems that over time gain support and financing and then become policy. Many of these activities might come from outside the system, from civil society, academia, or the private sector, who look at the same problems but with different lenses and see different opportunities. But some of the answers are already here. Somewhere in your organizations, maybe in a very small way, maybe just in one office, people are trying things out that will become a vital element of the change that we have to make. What we have to do is find these things and support them. This is what the ADAPT initiative aims to do. We are still in our inception phase, but we seek to build a broader and more inclusive coalition around climate-related crises, raise awareness on the threats of and responses to these crises, support organizations in affected countries to generate and share knowledge of what works, assist humanitarian and disaster management organizations to plan for these crises, and finally, make scientific knowledge on climate and disasters available to communities and practitioners on the ground. In this aim, we've published a report called Climate Change and Humanitarian Action, which sets out the state of play between climate change and the humanitarian sector. It is available on our website, and I highly recommend giving it a read for a good overview of what the situation is. The ADAPT initiative is proudly supported by Group ERD. Thank you so very much for having listened to this lightning talk. We are very interested in creating new partnerships, so do not hesitate to reach out. You have our website, as well as our Twitter and my email right here on the slide. Thank you so much for having listened.
Hello everyone, good morning. I'm Tri from POI or OpenStreetMap Indonesia, and today I would like to share with you one of our projects, collective mapping for data-driven flood mitigation. So the densely populated Jakarta greater area experiences flooding regularly, which has displaced tens of thousands of people every year. It is one of the missions of National Land Agency's Project Office and UNDP Accelerator Labs Indonesia to reduce flood in Jakarta greater area. Lakes play a vital role in reducing floods through its storage capacity, whereas any shrinkage or loss can amplify the damage for nearby communities. Increasing and maintaining the lake's conditions is a priority for the local government. And to identify the flood mitigation potential from these lakes, an updated dataset was needed to measure recent changes in condition and functions. POI or OpenStreetMap Indonesia with UNDP Accelerator Labs Indonesia and National Land Agency Project Office conducted data collection to increase the quality of information on these lakes through collective mapping. So through this initiative, we are emphasizing the role of communities as possessors of knowledge who have a better understanding of the conditions and issues surrounding the natural and artificial lakes. Local surveyors from nearby locations of the lakes conducted the data collection and gathered responses from communities. The survey was conducted using mobile phones, and there are mobile phone apps for that, Ushahidi and Mapillary, so it's very easy and very practical. These surveyors also participated in a capacity building sessions that focuses on technical skill for the mapping process. And then after that, POI mapped the lakes into the OSM and validated the data gathered in Ushahidi and then noted if there were any findings. Lake data and findings are used to optimize lakes for flood mitigation efforts and to develop lake management protocols by the government. So this is the mapping result. You can see the before and after. The before we only have static map, whereas in the after we have dynamic maps. And you can see every details for every lakes. And yeah, this is the mapping result as well. So we managed to map 170 lakes in only 10 days by 12 surveyors. And our mapping activity was featured on two biggest media in Indonesia. IDN Times is the leading media platform company that has exposure on 70 million millennials and Gen Z in Indonesia. And Tirto ID is the first Indonesian news outlet that has been accepted as one of 44 verified members of International Fact-Checking Networks, or IFCN Code of Principles. And this is one of the documentation. One of the local surveyors took pictures of inlet and the current condition of the lakes using Ushahidi mobile apps. And this one is also the documentation. One of the local surveyor interviewed the people who live nearby the lake to gather some insight regarding the socio-economic condition around the lake. And you can also see the example of the mapillary result. And all the mapping data are open to public, so you can see it on openstreetmap.org, mapillary.com, and also you can visit the Ushahidi platform at s.id/lake-mapping. And you can also watch our footage on YouTube, s.id/lag-mapping-video. And that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you around.
Thank you, and that's a great example of a locally led initiative around a bit like our ADAPT speaker was saying just before. So we're right on time. If you have questions for any of our speakers, you can reach out to them during the day, so don't hesitate to do that. And otherwise, I encourage you to start moving towards your next roundtable. So here in the auditorium, just to remind you that we have our digital systems and participation compatible roundtable planned, and it will also be what's available for remote participants. You have in room A, collecting and visualizing environmental data, opportunities and challenges. And in room B, success stories of satellite imagery used to reveal or respond to the environmental crisis. So they'll start in a few minutes, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Because we are on the we're focusing on the policy side.